Welcome back, everyone, to the weekly Armchair Kickoff podcast. Today, I'm joined by a very special guest, and we are joined again by Phil Brown from Beyond the Pitch. So Phil's been on a couple of times, and we have had very kind of good, detailed chats about Manchester United. So I've asked Phil to come on today because I suppose, look, it's been a hectic couple of weeks to be a Manchester United fan. Look, and I've wanted to speak to Phil kind of with regards to the whole situation that's going on with our club, because I feel like we kind of have those similar views with regards to the situation. Phil, how's it going today? How are you?
Well, good, Keane. How you doing, son? Thanks for having me on.
I'm very good now, Phil. All excited for tonight's game against Luton Town. I can't wait now. It's always like seeing Manchester United on the telly, so it's good to kind of see us back on the screen tonight. Anyway, Phil, I'd like to talk to you about kind of just about our transfer activity now. Kind of this summer, it's been kind of, I suppose, it's been just another whirlwind again, of drama. Really, we've got Donny van de Beek in, and it's been kind of, he's been, I suppose, an inspired sign. He's shown kind of a couple of games that he's played that he's been, like a revelation. He's been very good. And you can see what he's going to give to the team. But in terms of the other stuff that's going on, obviously with Jadon Sancho transfer and other deals like the failed deals for Regulion, and we're kind of haggling over Alex Telles. Like, just what do you make of the whole situation that's going on?
Well, I mean, every year we go into these windows with the same hope, and we get the same outcome. We hope that we will have some level of competency, some level of aptitude, and in the end, we get an absolute mess. Look, the speculation is always going to be there. It's part of Manchester United, but you judge United on what they've done, and I don't care what anyone says. And the Solskjaer's idea of a successful window wasn't Donny van de Beek and Alexis Sanchez being moved out by this stage. And every manager that feels at United says the same thing. You would like to think that at some point the people above them say, look, let's learn from what previous managers have said, because they can't always be wrong and we're always right. Maybe there's something to what they're saying. Maybe we do need to do these deals earlier, right? But it always seems to me like the reason why these deals get done is because the selling club turns around to United and says, this is what it's going to take to get it done. And finally, United think there's nothing else they can possibly do but either pay this money or make it happen. As long as they feel there's something else they can do, the deals don't get done. And there's constant messing about. And we hear this constantly from selling clubs, that they get irritated with how they go about these things. They get bemused, they ruin relationships. It is just ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous that a football club this size is doing business like it's a Vauxhall conference team. I mean, it is embarrassing every year that this is the situation. And I mean, what have we got? A week and a half left of the window, 2 weeks.
Yeah, 5th of October it's closing. Very, very, very. Like, what is it today? Like, it's the 22nd. Do you know what I mean? So, like, we don't have long to go.
You've got a recruitment team that can't sell players and can't buy players, but other than that, they're quite good.
And like you look at it, Phil, like I'm looking at this situation, like as you said, like there's plenty of players that need to be off the books. Like you look at players such as Phil Jones, look at the likes of Chris Small and Diogo Dalot, players who are probably not going to play much over the course of the season, and who want probably a very considerable big wage as well. You look at other players like Juan Mata as well, who's like, he's not even making the 18-man squad, and he's on £160,000 a week. You look at the ineptitude of us at the moment in terms of transfers. Like we're struggling to get people in, we're struggling to get people out. You kind of look at it as well with the lack of kind of the football director of football in there. It's all a mess at the moment.
Again, it points towards the fact that there is no level of competency anywhere. I mean, I look at these people that are in these positions that are all exceptionally well paid. They're all £1 million a year. They're about. I'm struggling to see what it is they do that justifies that outlay. Some of them are on more than the players. For what? Where are you justifying that? I mean, I don't know any other job in any other, company where you can get away with being that incompetent every year. I don't understand how they justify their wages. I really don't.
And like you look at like kind of the recent kind of times, I suppose, like they're under like a lot of scrutiny, and like recently Patrice Evra, the happiest man like ever, like like I always see his videos on a Monday. He's always full of positivity, and so he likes to kind of generate a positive vibe towards like the fan base. And to see that 20-minute video yesterday, it actually destroyed me watching it, because to see a man like him come out and talk about how he feels and how like it's destroying him, kind of how our club's been run. It was kind of good to see one of our own come out and actually speak how it likes me and likes you are feeling. Do you know what I mean? It felt it was refreshing to kind of see it, but at the same time, it really did destroy me yesterday when I seen Evra and kind of come and seeing out that the way we're running the club is affecting him as well.
Well, I mean, look, there's been lots of people have spoken about this. Schools have spoken about this. Gary Neville's spoken about this. Lots of players have spoken about this. But you know, ultimately, the people that make the decisions are almost deaf to it. The Glazers. You know, Ed Woodward's not going to sack himself. He's not going to sack his mates. He's not going to sack Richard Arnold. He's not going to sack Matt Judge. They're his mates. You know, and the people that can sack them don't know how to listen. You know, because for the Glazers clearly feel like these people are giving them a return. It's not on the football side. It can only be on the business side. So, by what measure are you successful at United? You know, what are they rewarding at United? Certainly not football aptitude. You know, so the Glazers feel like these people are doing a good job, and they don't care what Patrice Evra says. They don't care what any of them says. So it's really disappointing.
Yeah, and like I look at it from the perspective that you look in these past 7 years, kind of post Sir Alex Ferguson, you look at in terms of like progression. We finish fourth, we get a Champions League place. There seems to be a lack of ambition to kind of make that kind of next step. Whereas if we finish outside of the Champions League places, the club almost panic and they go out and they make signings. Like, you've seen the progression that we made, Phil, after Christmas last season, where we were 14 points off Leicester, and Ollie managed to turn that around and get us into third place. Now, albeit, like, people will say 66 points for third place wasn't great, but to consider the fact that we were 14 points off third and we managed to pull that back, what we should be looking at then is, let's try bridge the gap. Let's try get back challenging. Now, look, albeit Liverpool and Manchester City are in a very kind of comfortable position. They're kind of in the ascendancy in terms of being the top clubs in the league at this moment in time. But where's the ambition? Do you know, like I think that's what's killing our fan base, is that we're not seeing ambition from them owners, and it's just an absolute disgrace that they're using us as a cash cow. It's absolutely disgusting.
Well, mate, none of these problems are new. And even when you go back to when Ferguson was successful, he wasn't successful because the Glazers were handling money. He was successful because he was a genius at what he done. And whenever Ferguson left and it became incumbent upon the Glazers to actually invest in a football club, it depends how you crunch the numbers. If you look at it over the last 5 years, the average spend is around 75 million net spend. For a club United says that's paltry. They have a completely different perspective on it. They'll say, well, we've given Solskjaer more money than any other coach in Europe has got. But you know, the thing is, the club was in such a mess that they had to do that. And, you know, it's also misleading because, you know, one of the things that, to be fair, big clubs don't do well is they don't sell well. Because in order for a big club to sell, a couple of things have to happen. That player has to be a success, in which case they don't want to sell them if they're a success. You know, that the player has to want the way. Most of the time when big clubs are selling players, it's because the players come to a club and they haven't developed sufficiently and they're not good enough and they want to sell them on, so they take a loss, right? United aren't the only club that does that, but they are one of the only clubs at the very top level that are now fixated on resale value. Now, here's the problem with being fixated on resale value. So by its very nature, you buy a young prospect who hasn't developed, who's still got development left in them. If that is going to dictate your transfer policy, then you can't expect to be successful. All you'll ever have a team of is potential. And once they reach that potential, your view is to sell them. I can understand that at other clubs that have limited ability to generate revenue, but not at a club like Manchester United. That's totally absurd. And it's great in computer games, but not in reality.
Yeah.
And again, go back to what we're saying about clubs. So are we saying that we want to sell our best players? Once they develop into a top player, we want to sell them?
Are we almost going to become that feeder club? Like, let's say I'm not showing them any disrespect because like there'd be fans of them on the podcast, but are we going to become like a Tottenham Hotspur? Like, you take for example, Phil. I'm just going to use this as an example, kind of right now. Like Sergio Regulion, I know it's a player we were linked with. Real Madrid wanted to put in a buyback clause at 45 million into the contract. So almost 2 years in, when he develops, Madrid are going to snap him back. And Spurs are like, oh yeah, they bent over and they're like, yeah, look, we'll do that, no bother at all. Like Manchester, I'm in a way, I'm kind of happy United didn't do that, but at the same time, are we going to become that feeder club? Whereas when Rashford develops, Mason Greenwood develops, what happens then when like a Real Madrid or a Barcelona or something like that comes sniffing around? Are we going to be like, yeah, lads, there you go, you can have him, thanks very much for the transfer fee?
There's a couple of things. First of all, once again, we hear about a clause that, and we hear about this clause the day before said player goes to a particular club, such as Holland, right?
Yeah, we had chat about this before, yeah.
Yeah, and so so we see Regulon, and a couple of things. First of all, I doubt it would have came as a surprise to Sevilla that Real Madrid wanted to put a buyback clause in there. So that would have been known when you had played Sevilla at the end of the season. Well, how long has it been? What, 6 weeks?
Yeah.
Since that happened? So United should have at least known 6 weeks ago that there was a clause in that contract, right? So let's say that was the case and he never really was a consideration. Where's the alternative? Why isn't there someone else? It seems like they just moved on to Alex Telles a week ago. Certainly didn't seem like they were doing this weeks ago. Alex Telles has been for sale all summer. So did they just find out about this clause, right? Did they take a month to find out Real Madrid won't renegotiate it out? They won't renegotiate it out because they've got somebody else that's willing to pay for it, right? In Tottenham. Now, again, here we have a situation where we've got a young left back. Imagine Regulon comes in next season to Spurs. Spurs finished in the top 4, United finished 5th, right? And one of the reasons why they did is because they had a solid left back that was exceptional for them. If he gives Tottenham a year or two of exceptional service and moves on at a profit, it's a good deal, right? He's returned his investment on the pitch. Certainly, whenever Ibrahimovic came in to play for United, I wasn't worried about how much they'd sell him for later on.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? It was about what he was doing at that current moment. So again, this is a club that becomes fixated on how much profit we can make on players that we sell. Again, and it's also only relevant if Regulon wants to leave, right? What if Regulon stays at United 2-3 years, turns around at 25, 26 to Madrid and says, look, I'm really happy here, I want to stay, right? Because this club's moving forward, blah, blah, blah. I'm sure that clause could be bought out, right? So, and I imagine if Regulon develops significantly and plays well, he will want to stay, right? So, and if you look at Real Madrid left back problems, or left back, they spent, 50 million on Ferland Mendy a year ago. Yeah. They've still got Marcelo. So I know Marcelo's come to the end of his career, so I doubt that left back position is going to open up anytime soon for Regulon, unless Mendy fails too. So it just, to me, it doesn't reflect well on United again.
And like, even I know this is probably a player you didn't want, but yeah, I know someone who was heavily linked with us was Gareth Bale. Like, what do you make of that situation? With like, I know we've had a situation with Jadon Sancho for the right hand side. Like, it's been kind of a long drawn out process, and look, I suppose we're kind of monitoring FC in that respect. Like, we're kind of monitoring the situation as has been repeatedly been said in the media. Like, would you have taken Gareth Bale on that loan deal, or do you want to distance yourself from that?
I'm taking him on a loan deal. On a loan deal, is he better than what we have? Of course.
Yeah.
It's just a guy that is a top footballer, exceptional player. Loan deal, you've got you can send them back if it doesn't work. And you're getting one of the top. I mean, I think he'll be an exceptional player for Tottenham. Yes, I would have taken him. So as opposed to what? I mean, no disrespect to Dan James here, and then Bale can play, anywhere. He can play on the left, can play on the right. Dan James, to me, isn't the quality that United need starting in that position. A decent little bench player, but once after 4 or 5 weeks where teams started to work out, don't give him space in behind, then he became really ineffective. And so really likable kid. Really likable kid. And I would love to see him be successful at United. But it's hard for me to see how Dan James is going to discover the ability to beat players that you need to have as United.
You need to have that football intelligence. Like that doesn't happen overnight.
Well, he's great if you give him space in behind. You know, he can attack that space. He puts a decent ball in. But teams that sit deep against United, teams that score first, stuff like that, he is a problem because he finds it very difficult to operate in front of players. It's just not a technical ability to get past them, to beat players that you need from a right winger, which is one of the reasons why Jadon Sancho is really important.
Yeah, like I think with me, like I suppose the next thing I would ask you, Phil, like with regards to kind of the whole Sancho situation, like I posed this question to the lads last night. Like what would you prioritise now at this moment in time? Because obviously, look, the game against Palace, are kind of defensive issues were kind of very highlighted in that fixture. Like, would you prioritise a top quality centre back over Jadon Sancho? Or would you be still kind of been focused on getting Sancho in because of his quality in the attack?
Well, here's the thing, Kim. I've always said that I've always felt that the centre back position was the most important decision for United to address this summer, right? But if it's true that United's transfer policy, emergency, whatever, changed after Crystal Palace, it's just a reflection of how shallow it all is.
How well prepared.
Well, what did you learn against Crystal Palace that you need a centre back? You learned that against Crystal Palace. Were you not watching last season? You know, you can't win the league without centre back pairing, right? So, and to be fair to United, yes, transfers are a problem, but they should have had enough players at that football club to beat Crystal Palace. And Solskjaer has to take the blame for that, because what was obvious was that United were way off the pace, right? They looked like a team that were playing their first pre-season friendly. Everything was off. They were slow. They were ponderous. First touch was poor. They were getting caught in possession. Martial was taking poor first touch, getting caught. Lots of players were doing this. But you look at Man City against Wolves. It was a much harder fixture than Crystal Palace at home. I mean, Crystal Palace are a nothing football club. They don't spend any money. They have zero ambition. They're a nothing football club. And they were coming and beating United because with one really good player, Zaha. No, I mean, at some point too, the players there also have to take responsibility and say, looked like they were meek. It looked like they accepted that defeat to me. It looked like even when they went 1-0 down, there was no response. There was no tenacity there. And part of this is what happens. We saw Luke Shaw, which you give him credit, is players read the newspapers too. Players read social media too. They get caught up in it. So when you don't bring players in and they see their rivals bringing in players are just like fans. They're envious. They're looking at that going, I wish I played for Chelsea. You know, look at the players they're bringing in. So when you see Luke Shaw coming out and saying this club badly needs players, Solskjaer has said it many different ways. You've got ex-players saying it. The pressure inside United must be immense. So we're going to find out over the next 2 weeks exactly what type of football club we're dealing with here. One that makes excuses or one that makes silence.
Yeah, 100%. And like, look, I suppose my point of view with this, like I suppose all summer I've been like kind of get Sancho in, but I'm kind of looking at it now. If it means like, I know we have Greenwood on the right, and Greenwood, like, look, he's been quality like, in the kind of 12 months he's kind of burst onto the scene. He's done very well. I look at holes in this team. I think a centre back massively. You need a leader there beside Maguire, or at least someone with a bit of pace. Because where Maguire has his kind of, I suppose, aerial ability and his reading of the game is fantastic. He does get caught in the half turn a lot, and you need someone there with a bit who can read the game and who has a bit of pace and tenacity about him, so to win the ball. Another position I think massively is holding midfield. I think that's somewhere. I think a lot on Saturday. I know it's only Crystal Palace, but if it was a quality team, we would have seen it more. I think that the gap between the holding midfield and the centre backs was very telling. It was very telling, and you need someone there who's going to anchor that midfield to provide that protection, almost in that kind of Michael Carrick-esque kind of role, where they kind of sit in between them two centre halves and provide that kind of stability there. We didn't have that. Now, I love Scott McTominay. He's one of my favourite players. So like he shows passion, he plays for the badge. But if you're thinking long term, you're thinking about challenging, you're going to need a top quality defensive midfielder in there. That's my opinion.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I think what you need to look for in that defensive midfield role is something that's different. I think you see it even at Liverpool, where in the past we've seen that an old style defensive midfielder in the Nemanja Matic, where it's been physical, not the most technical, but providing protection in front of the back four. The problem is Liverpool have a better centre back pair than United do. So they can afford to have a player that doesn't give as much. If you look at Thiago, for example, Thiago led the Bundesliga in the most intercepted passes, right? So he's someone that is very, very good at reading the play, at breaking up attacks, almost like a Michael Carrick, and setting attacks up. One of the problems United had, and they're not the only Premier League club to do this, coming out from the back, they're really, really poor. And so connecting that ball from defence to midfield and starting up attacks is not great. And I think that's what they're going to try to do with Pogba, is play him in the deeper role. But the thing that concerns me about that is that that's going to leave United's back four very exposed, because Pogba's not great at tracking runners. And so when United are under attack, there's going to be a lot of room for midfielders, because Fernandes is an advanced midfielder and so is Van de Beek. I wonder how long United will persevere with this for, but this is again another attempt to try to fit Pogba into a midfield. For me, this is a massive season for Paul Pogba. He hasn't done anything in the last 2 years. It suggests he's a £90 million midfielder, right? So if he wants a move, how he does this season will determine where he goes, whether he goes to a top club for big money or whether he doesn't. So I think United are probably going to play him in that role, in a more defensive role. And I think that's what they're looking at, is more of a defensive ball player rather than a old defensive holding midfielder like we saw in the Nemanja Matic before. So I think that's what we will see. And but you can see what Solskjaer's trying to do, and I think that's where modern football is going. You know, I'm not surprised he's trying to do that. I just have my doubts that Pogba's capable of playing that role.
Yeah, I think like Paul Pogba, he's more of a kind of a box to box kind of a number 8 kind of player, but in terms of holding midfielder, I don't think he has the attributes to kind of play there in terms of that. Like he does, as you said, like in terms of tracking runners. Again, I think it was the West Ham game at Old Trafford as well last season. You kind of seen that, you know, he was getting closed down kind of very quickly, very abruptly. Like you see teams like, let's say if you played him there against Liverpool, who kind of, when their midfielders do press in their front three, like I think that we'd be caught there. Phil, with defenders, like a young defender we have is Mengi. He seems to be he's after getting promoted permanently now to the first team. Would you like to see him play a bit of ball this season now, because he has shown quite great potential?
We'd like to see him, of course. I think, you know, it's interesting. Solskjaer compared him to Matthijs de Ligt, who's a young ball playing centre back. He is right footed though. You know, even though he's played on the left hand side, he's another right footed centre back. He's even played pre-season at left back. Very, very good young defender by all accounts. So I do want to see him play, yeah, and I think Solskjaer will play. We'll see him this season. But what I would like to see is these young players come into a team without the pressure of having to be first team players, where they can be given the ability to develop without having that immense pressure of you need to be ready. For centre backs, a very, very hard position for a young player. You know, when United bought Phil Jones, they played him at right back. They were not sure about putting him into a central position so early, so young. Centre of the pitch is primarily where games are won and lost. And even if you go back to De Gea, when he was brought into United at a very, very young age, playing a very lonely role, like a goalkeeping role, these are where mistakes cost you games. These are where everything gets magnified. You know, you look at, you know, it's young players like Rashford, whatever, you know, these young players that play out wide to start out there, they have a much better chance of being successful. With the young kids in the middle, it's about so much more than ability. It's about maturity. It's about having mental attributes, because the pressure is going to be immense, especially against Premier League centre forwards. So I think I would like Mengi to get games this season. with some realism and some patience that he's a young centre back, and they take time, and they won't see the best of. It may be a couple of years before we see young Mengi. That one of the problems is Tuanzebe has been injured constantly, which is really frustrating.
Been a shame.
Yeah, so he's basically lost a key year of his career. He's 23 now, so this really is the time where this young lad shows whether he's capable of playing professional football or not. For a club like Manchester United, he's not alone. We've seen this with other players at United that have consistently injured. So, this also is part of the problem for United, is that they've got players like Phil Jones. They've got players that are Marcus Rojo. They're on contracts that are not commensurate with their ability. That makes them impossible to get rid of. So when you're saying we need to sell to buy, but these players are impossible to sell, you handicap yourself. They should never have been given these contracts. Never.
Like Phil Jones, he's given a 5-year contract.
It's total insanity. And I think, that is something that is the cost United over the years of having to pay off people that never should have been given. Mourinho being another one, is just truly unbelievable.
Yeah, and you allude to Phil Jones. Like last January, he was given a 5-year contract. When he didn't do anything to kind of justify. And look, I'm not like, he's probably a nice guy. Look, and I'm not going to kind of diss him in that type of way. But from a footballing standpoint, for him to be given a 5-year contract, I think Joe was, again, what did he do to justify it? It's mind-boggling, really, like what's going on at the club.
No, I mean, look, but we talked about earlier about the executives at the football club. By what measure have these people been successful to deserve the contracts that they're on? I mean, I don't know. So what do you reward at United? Ander Herrera, for example, to me was a player that, okay, if they didn't want to pay his wages, that's fine. But I could understand them paying his wages more than what I could giving it to Phil Jones. I could understand that. I could understand if, because, the club needed a midfielder, they didn't sign one, which was truly unbelievable what happened last season, the first half of it. And so, again, we keep seeing this. I think that there'll be a couple who will move on before the end of the season. I still think Chris Smalling will go.
Romero, maybe.
Possibly Romero. I hope Romero does get a move, because he's been brilliant for United. He deserves to go somewhere and start. I find it amazing that I think Leeds are interested in Romero. Bielsa likes him. So I still think a couple more will leave before the end of the season, before the end of this window. Jesse Lingard's down to the last year of his contract. I think ideally they would like to sell him. So if they can, they will. But the other part of the problem is some of the player sales are having to fund player moves. So United are asking for as much money for these players as possible, some of which they aren't worth it. And so because they need that money to buy players. So it's going to be really interesting. But again, it's just, by this stage, United should have 99% of their business done. And if they want to add one or two players to beef up the squad, fine. But the fact is that 2/3 of United's business isn't done yet. With 2 weeks of the window to go is just a disgrace.
Yeah, 100%. And look, I suppose with the 2 weeks to go, it'd be interesting to see kind of what happens in terms of transfers. Phil, I'm just going to ask you one final question regards to Manchester United. Like, in terms of the season ahead, like, what do you think with the current squad now? Well, let's say, like, we kind of look ahead and we say we get one in, we get a Sancho in, or we go in and get maybe an alternative firm. Like, where do you think is a realistic expectation we can have as fans that we can kind of we can have in terms of an acceptable season for us with the current squad?
Yeah, with the current squad, top four is about all you can ask for. I think what we saw last season with Solskjaer is probably what United are at. A good team, not a great team. They lost 3 semi-finals, right? They finished third, but they weren't a third-place team, right? Let's be honest. It was a false position. So if you look at United, they're a good team, not a great team. Great teams find themselves in finals, find themselves with trophies. So I think with the team as it is, it hasn't improved slightly with Van de Beek. But in relation to the rivals, because that's really the barometer, it's not just how much have you improved, it's improved in comparison to your rivals also. You know, Liverpool, City, Chelsea have all improved more than United have this summer. You could argue Spurs have too, same as Arsenal. So this has put the club in a very difficult situation, because I think as things currently stand, if Solskjaer finished top four, then I think he not overachieved, but I think that's about right. I don't think you could ask any more than that. If they send another couple, like a Jadon Sancho and a good left back or a centre back, then I think they should be looking to finish top four comfortably. I think they should be within 10 points of the leaders, in my opinion. A trophy and top four, because at some point Solskjaer has to win something. So that for me has to be the bare minimum. But it all depends on how he gets supported and what happens over the next 2 weeks. A lot of things have to happen in the next 2 weeks. And for a football club that do almost nothing, I just can't see all this activity being crammed into one. I hope I'm wrong, but I just don't see it.
Yeah, I suppose I'm pessimistic really about it. Like, I think maybe we get one deal. I think we might cave in and get Sancho. But again, if we end up paying the 108 million for him, that what's been quoted now,
I don't see it happening.
Why didn't we do it then? Like, do you know?
I don't see that happening at all. I don't.
Yeah.
There are certain people. What's interesting, like, is that United will tell you they have options, plan B's to Sancho. So they have to get somebody. So we will see.
Yeah, absolutely. Phil, thanks very much for coming on.
My pleasure, kid. Anytime, son.
It's been a great chat, and look, we'll be back again Thursday. We have David Lee, former Chelsea player in England, under 21 international. So that'll be a great chat. He's going to talk to me, Jack, and Sean about his career. So that'll be good. And again, Phil, I'm delighted to always have you on as always.
My pleasure,
best luck to BTP as well.
You too, son. All the best, Keane. Take care, love.
Cheers.
Take care, mate.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Phil. Bye bye.